Support for Radio Friends comes from Labrunerie Financial, where they work to ensure a lifetime of financial security for people from all walks of life, from investment services to retirement plans. If you're looking for a trustworthy company that has the experience and knowledge to put your interests first, contact Labrunerie Financial, a community-based investment counseling firm since 1966. Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Monday, October the 10th. You know, October is Blind Equality Achievement Month. And many times when we think of a person being blind, we think that they are not able to partake in mainstream activities. And nothing could be further from the truth. And our next guest is a perfect example of that. Gary Wunder from National Federation of the Blind. Good to have you here, Gary.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know, you are an inspiration to me. You've been blind since birth, correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
But everything that you do, and you do on your own, is really an inspiration to me, and I hope to our listeners and viewers. There are several things that you wanted to point out today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know that I'm an inspiration to me, but what I was able to learn to do is really revolutionary. I was afraid that to be blind would be to be sheltered, to be taken care of, never to be respected by my family. And my family loved work. So they might have tolerated the fact that I didn't work, but I wouldn't have gotten much respect. And what I learned through the National Federation of the Blind, and in fact the goodness of the American government, was that if I promised to try to get a job, they would give me rehabilitation and education. That's a pretty good deal for America to offer its citizens. So what I came to talk about was we just had a recent convention, and that convention had 2,400 people. We all went to the Big Easy in New Orleans. And we had 2,400 people come, and we had 1,400 people who, because of COVID, decided kind of to hang out and to listen to the convention through Zoom.
Yeah.
And one of the first topics that we talked about was COVID testing, because blind people have had trouble getting COVID tests. One is that the areas for giving them were so very public, like when in 2020 here, if you wanted a COVID test, you had to go sit in the Hearns parking lot, like for 3 hours. Like when it was hot in early July. And who do you get to take you to those tests if you fear you might already have COVID? Do you get your average Uber, Lyft, or cab driver and say, I think I'm sick, but I'd like you to go sit with me for 3 hours to take these tests?
That's a problem.
Exactly. So one of the things that the government has been working on in industry is in-home tests. And wouldn't you know it, they made in-home tests, but they never thought that blind people would be administering them and trying to read them for themselves. So one of the things at our convention was to work with manufacturers and the Centers for Disease Control. We had a prominent official from CDC come, and they thanked us for the fact that we have worked so hard to make corona tests that are actually accessible by the blind, ones that we can administer to ourselves and ones where we can get the results.
So you now have a home test that can be administered by a blind person, and the blind person can hear the results? Is that right?
Yeah. Now, the trick is that you've got to have a smartphone in order to do that, because it's going to use a Bluetooth connection. But yes, there are 2 tests on the market now. There are many more tests that we need to make available. But the interesting thing is that Corona has revealed this tremendous need for home testing of all kinds, not just for the coronavirus.
Right.
And if we get in on the ground floor of this and make tests accessible, we'll solve a big problem for blind people. And the CDC has committed to work with us to see that this happens. So most things that you now go to your doctor for, we're hoping to have home tests for, so that you can decide whether to go to your doctor.
Right. So that was one thing that was covered. What are some of the other topics?
One of the things we talked about was audio description for entertainment and for educational television. Used to be, when I was a kid, you didn't much need audio description. If Marshall Dillon was riding along and he came upon the villain and he said, "All right, stop, get off your horse," and you heard leather from the saddle and you heard his
Right.
feet hit the ground, you knew that the guy had gotten off his horse. If you heard bang, bang, Marshall either shot at the guy or the guy shot at the marshal, and
Right.
you could figure it out. But right now everybody talks about the great visuals for television. But the truth is, the more visual it gets, the less audio that there is. So you
Right.
can
It's
actually
a lot of times it's visual with the music, which is
Exactly.
descriptive. But if you can't see, you're losing out on that.
One of the movies that I watched recently had the first 7 or 8 minutes be completely music. And what I would not have known without the audio description is that we were going to a funeral of a father for an autistic young man. And everybody was looking at this young man with admiration, but quite a bit of concern, because he was a success, but he was a success when he had his father around to help him. Without audio description, I would not have known the framework for that whole movie, which was how he made the transition to function on his own. So audio description poses lots of interesting issues. It actually creates some jobs for blind people, because we need good writers to actually describe what's going on once it's been described to us. And then we need narrators, people who can actually read that stuff at the right time. So there's a lot of work for blind people in the training, and there's a lot of work in actually doing the description, and it makes television accessible to us. And it's not just a matter of entertainment now, because so much information that we use for education is coming through television in an audiovisual format, whether it's off the internet or whether it's through mainstream stations.
And if you're blind, you need to have some type of interpretation there in order to learn from it.
Exactly. It can't be as simple as watch this. It has to actually have some description with it.
And for those of us who are sighted, many times we don't stop and think about that.
Yeah, and for many of us who are blind, it took us a while to catch on to the fact that we weren't getting very much out of these educational shows.
Yeah.
And we were doubting ourselves rather than saying what we need is an addition to the medium.
Yeah. We're almost out of time here, Gary, but how would you sum up exactly what you got out of that convention? What was the most important thing you got from the convention?
A lot of stimulation. I'm not the only guy out there fighting these fights. I've got a lot of people with me, a lot of people who can benefit, and a lot of people who are my allies. And that's really good to know. It's good to know that the average blind person can do the average job in the average place of business if given opportunity. And that's what the National Federation of the Blind is all about, is making sure that we get that opportunity. And it's wonderful to be involved in a cause larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what it gives me.
You know what, Gary? You are a wonderful voice for the National Federation for the Blind. If people want more information on this, they can go to www.nfbmo.org. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, Gary, thank you so much for coming by.
This has been a blast.
It really is always a pleasure visiting with you, and I learn something new every time you're on.
Thank you.
All right, stay healthy and come back and visit us again.
Will do.
All right, something you'd like to hear or see, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email, pepperp@missouri.edu. Bye-bye.